So the first area of impact I'll show with production is in our cycle frequency of production. So we would like to produce everything every week from a service level perspective in very large batches and not spend too much time converting. As we get smaller SKUs, we have to go to longer production cycles, so we're only making something every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks for our low volume SKUs. And that means that it's just more of a challenge to achieve our service level goals. And finally, on the complexity side, the number of loads is increasing quite significantly as well. So you can see our load, number of items per load is up about 20% in the last 5 years. And that just means loading the trucks much more challenging and a lot more complex to deliver as well. So how are we managing the complexity? I want to talk about 3 specific things here, and they're very specific to our supply chain. First is how we produce with rigid cycle production. The second is how we plan pallets, and this is what we call our optimized order quantity. And the third is how we build pallets, and that's really using technology in the warehouse environment to try to help us manage the complexity. So first, on rigid cycle production. So what we do to make sure that as we're dealing with these extended, I guess more complex production environment, we have to make sure that every time we convert and we have downtime and ramp up time due to the conversion, we're getting the most bang for our buck, right? So each SKU is assigned a production cycle of every 1, 2, 3, or 4 weeks. Each brewery has a specific production sequence on each packaging line, and both the brewery and zone planning teams have targets on achieving what we call cycle compliance. Breweries can request exceptions for variations out of their control, and we track root cause of non-compliances every week. So here's an example of one of the dashboards that we use to track this. This shows our 12 big U.S. breweries, and I'll just use Baldwinsville as an example up in the upper left. They have, for the month of September, when I pulled this data, 99.56% compliance. And you can see a large portion of that, about 80% of it, is basically just on-target cycles. And the green portion is an approved exception, meaning there was a good reason for them to change from the cycle. And I'll explain a few of those on the following slide. And in other cases, there's some that are pending. You can see where the analysis is underway, and others that were off target in Merrimack and Cartersville, where something occurred in the supply chain that caused a variance that was not an approved exception, most likely an equipment breakdown or some other brewery-related production variance. So we track root causes so we can understand what's driving us away from this rigid compliance, so we can always do as well as possible in fixing these issues to make sure we're achieving as an efficient production environment as possible. So in this case, the top few, demand over max, okay, so that means the demand was actually lower than we expected, and so our production was planned over max, so we had to lower our production. Demand under min just means that the demand was higher than we expected, and we needed to raise our production, or I should say advance the cycle to move it up sooner and produce sooner rather than later. And you can see I won't go through all of them, but they are all generally pretty good reasons for changing things, but it's just the process of having a very rigid process of control between the zone and the breweries to make sure that we're never losing time and we're always maximizing every time we convert. And it's also integrated from brewery to brewery throughout the entire country, one supply chain moving together. The second thing I want to talk about is what we call optimized order quantity. So one of the benefits we have with our supply chain is that we are really a vendor-managed inventory at our wholesalers. So we are a push system to our wholesaler environment, and we can adjust the order quantities a little bit up and down if we need to maximize the efficiencies of our supply chain. So our supply network plan is created at an exact case quantity, and the order is then optimized to layer and pallet quantities to maximize the efficiencies during execution. And I'll explain a little bit more about that on the following slide. The order is then written, built, and shipped. So historically in Anheuser-Busch, this has worked like this. We would either provide the wholesaler a full pallet of product, 4 layers of product, or 0, meaning they could only get it in those quantities. And you can see right off the bat, that helps us a lot from the efficiency of execution, that we don't have to build really complex pallets, and we can move mostly full pallets when we're loading trucks, moving it around the warehouse, whatever it is. But not very good if you get below 4 layers that you're just going to ship them nothing, right? That's not a very good strategy to meet consumer demand. So what we've had to do over the years is, as more and more products have come out that are small volume, we've had to exclude things from this policy. And what that means is that we got to a situation where we were making a lot of pallets in any quantity with no limitations whatsoever. That is, in some ways, good for the customer, that they get exactly what they need, but it's also bad for the customer that they're not necessarily getting it in optimal quantities for them to receive and manage on the receiving side, dealing with unloading and finding a place to store it, et cetera, in their warehouses. So we've come up with a new way to segment our supply chain, and we basically treat high volume brands and SKUs different from low volume brands and SKUs. For high volume products, we treat them very similar to the way we have in the past, which is very effective, and it works very well for both us as a supplier and our wholesalers as a customer. We've added a little bit of flexibility between the 4-layer minimum, and we actually do layer quantities above, up to a full pallet, just to provide a better, a more precise supply quantity, improve service level. And now we have our low volume SKUs allowed in a minimum of 1 layer and any layer quantity above that. So it really provides a very efficient way for us to build pallets and layer quantities. They're much more stable if you have individual layers of product instead of a lot of different mixed packages and configurations. Moving up a pallet, it can become very unstable and is bad for shipping. And what's the last point I was going to make? We also tailor it, our supply systems automatically tailor the amount that's needed to the particular size of that SKU. So that if the wholesaler is selling, let's say, 1 layer in a month, they're only going to get 1 layer. But if they're selling 1 layer a week, then they're probably going to get 2, 3, 4 layers at a time, particularly if it's a 4-week cycle item. So they're getting just the right amount of product when they need it.